Hi everyone, today we will be going on a journey to the coastal marine ecosystem off of Vancouver Island, British Columbia. We will examine a story full of ecological concepts such as trophic cascades, keystone species, top-down regulation, predation, and the competitive exclusion principle. Our story begins in the pre-colonial era, long before Europeans set foot on Vancouver Island. The island was home to various First Nations communities, including the Lekwungen peoples. They lived there for millennia and coexisted with a thriving, balanced, and healthy ecosystem. Key components of this place are its kelp forest, sea urchins, and most importantly, sea otters. I say most importantly because they are considered the keystone species of this ecosystem. Keystone species are defined as species that have disproportionately large effects on their natural environment relative to their abundance, and they essentially hold their ecosystem together. Sea otters serve a vital role in maintaining the health of their ecosystem, as for years they directly controlled the abundance of sea urchins, which indirectly protected the kelp forests. Sea otters are the only marine mammals without blubber, and they have extremely high metabolisms. Therefore, they must consume approximately 25% of their body weight every day. Luckily, this diverse habitat was teeming with food sources, and their favorite, conveniently, was the sea urchin. By snacking on these spiky critters, they provided essential top-down regulation to this habitat. Sea urchins are voracious grazers, meaning they eat lots of plants, and in this case, their meal of choice was kelp. Sea urchins have extremely long lifespans in the absence of predators, which can be up to almost 200 years. Therefore, the presence of the sea otter is extremely important for providing top-down regulation in this ecosystem. If populations are left unchecked or uneaten by the sea otters, they can expand rapidly and wreak havoc on these kelp forests, essentially clear-cutting them into a non-functioning state. In the competitive exclusion principle, when two species compete for the same resource, one inevitably wins and the loser is forced to adopt some strategy of survival. In this case, the sea otter was actually suppressing the somewhat assuming but very strong sea urchin predator. Therefore, when sea otters were hunted to local extinction off of the BC coast due to the maritime fur trade, which ran from the early 17th to mid-19th century, everything fell apart. When a loss within a food chain occurs, especially at the very top, a trophic cascade commences. This example shows a 3-level cascade with otters at the top, then urchins, then kelp as the primary producers. No sea otters meant no top-down regulation on the urchins and major damage to the kelp forests. This ecosystem endured a state of imbalance until the reintroduction of sea otters in the 1970s. This reestablished the ecosystem's keystone species, and over time, sea urchin populations declined and kelp forests were able to see some recovery. Unfortunately, this seemingly happy ending came with a lot of implications for the indigenous communities living there. As this ecosystem changed following the extinction of the otters, indigenous communities living there established robust urchin fisheries and relied on their abundance to make a living and sustain themselves. But now with the otters reintroduced, this has impacted their livelihoods and put a strain on local indigenous communities. The idea of cultural keystone species embodies the Mi'kmaq principle Etuaptimak, or two-eyed seeing, as it aims to blend the Western Eurocentric definition of an ecological keystone species with the added layer of cultural significance a keystone species may have to various communities, including indigenous communities. Just as much as a keystone species has influence on its ecological environment, it can also play a large role in shaping cultural identity. Cultural keystone species are defined as culturally prominent species that shape the cultural identity of a people, which is reflected in the fundamental roles these species play and have on a community's diet, materials, medicine, or spiritual practices. Just as the concept of an ecological keystone species has provided the lens through which conservation biologists can identify important elements that influence the dynamic processes and balances within ecosystems, the concept of cultural keystone species can allow us to consider the impacts of economic and environmental change on a particular group of people and their livelihoods, which is exactly what needs to be done in the case of Vancouver Island. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this video.